So I'm going to do a Ukraine update video today because obviously there's been some quite important stuff in the news and people keep asking me to do these. So the important thing at the moment is Putin's essentially escalated the war by declaring some of the, or basically all the territory he now has annexed in Ukraine, which I think is only about 18% of Ukraine now because the Russians have been losing a lot of land there. As officially parts of Russia, so they did some like essentially sham referendums, like rigged votes to say, do you want to be part of Russia or not? Obviously, the results came back like 98%. Everybody wants to be part of Russia, so now he's declared them parts of Russia. So he's now basically said, well, because it's part of Russia, we can use our own sort of conscripts there and everything else in a defensive thing. And if people attack this land, it's part of Russia, so we can nuke you. So I'm getting a bit bored of Putin's nuclear threat because a lot of people are worrying about it on the news. And again, he is a mentally unstable sort of old man, essentially. So there's obviously a possibility he could use nukes or stuff like that. But I think personally he'd escalate to chemical weapons before nuclear weapons. But the point is that obviously the reason I find the nuke stuff pretty boring with him is it's been since the start of this war. He's been doing this, you do this, we'll nuke you. It was, if you supply Ukraine with weapons, we'll nuke you. Oh, if Finland and Sweden, apply to join NATO, we'll nuke them. And it was all of this, and it's not ever stopped. So that's why I'm not very, worried in that sense about nuclear threat, because as much as he likes to saber rattle constantly about nukes, he's not done anything yet. I'm a lot more worried, in all honesty, about Zaporizhia, the nuclear power plant, that being shelled or something like that, than actually the probability of a nuclear weapon being used. Because one thing with a nuclear weapon in Ukraine is, let's say they use one tactical nuclear weapon or whatever, so they either use it on a load of troops, wipe out a load of troops, but then the international reaction to it will be so strong that it means even more aid and weapons will be flowing into Ukraine. Or he uses it against a city which might, so let's say, just for example, they nuke Kiev, and I doubt that will cause the Ukrainians to surrender if one city got nuked. But the thing is, if he launches a nuke like that, I imagine it would pull NATO in regardless, because if you end up, essentially using nukes as a genocidal kind of weapon against the city, I think that would be the point where lots of countries have probably said sort of, in private channels that we will escalate, even if it's not a conventional nuclear response from NATO, it might be all of your fleets getting sunk or something like that, So I'm not too worried about that, but as I said, there could be a chemical weapon thing. Now, obviously, the main reason he wants to do this is because he can call up mobilisation, so he can do the conscription sort of thing, call people up, and then basically say, Russia is actually a state of war, we're fighting to defend Russia. So, I can call up like 1 million men or whatever it is, and 300,000 to 1 million men or something, and have them, fighting essentially defensively on the territory he already owns and just try and hold on to it. Now, obviously, if you've been paying attention to any of this, the draft is not going well in Russia. They've had loads of people called up who shouldn't have been called up, like old people and the disabled and that, and there's loads of people either fleeing the country or like breaking their own limbs, on video. There's a pretty horrifying one where a guy gets his leg on the stair like that and gets somebody else to jump on his leg from the top of a flight of stairs, and you hear it snap and go like that. There's another one where a guy gets like a guy to sledgehammer his arm on like an anvil or something. He had it on in like a barn, which is pretty horrifying. But the point is that there's the crazy number is apparently there's been more people now that have fled the draft essentially in Russia than Putin had like his 200,000 men for the invasion initially into Ukraine. So that's a crazy thing in terms of like how many people are just trying to get away from Russia now in terms of like drafting and everything else. So I personally don't think this is actually going to change much in terms of the war for the Ukrainians, simply because they've already got the morale, they're fighting to take their country back, and just because, Putin says, well, I already took this territory over with troops, but now I'm officially calling it part of Russia, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to change the Ukrainians' response to, fighting him. Also, where that Nord Stream pipeline blew up the other day, some people saying America did it, some people saying Russia did it out of spite. Doesn't matter now. Now that's gone. There's basically not going to be any more gas to anywhere in Europe from Russia. So what that means is countries like Germany, that kept sitting on the fence as much as possible, really ought to just pull their finger out now and actually, supply Ukraine with tanks or whatever else, because of the fact that, if you're not getting gas from Russia anymore, it's not happening. So there's that. So, like I said, I'm not particularly worried about nukes, other than the fact I think Putin's actually getting more and more deranged. He is reminding me more and more of like Hitler in the famous downfall scene, screaming about Steiner's attack. I suppose it was Shoyu's attack. But yeah, it's not going well for Russia if you look on a military map. You know, Ukraine had the amazing Kharkiv offensive recently, and they've already again been going further east. In Kherson, they're getting closer and closer to like retaking Kherson, even though that's going slower because they seem to be being more careful about the offensive there. I guess not to send troops to their death needlessly, only attacking when they think they have a good chance of winning in a sort of battle. So yeah, Ukraine is definitely clawing back more territory. I've seen on some bits of the map there's been some Russian gains, but they've been incredibly minimal. For all the land Ukraine's retaking, Russia's like pushing so much more slowly and at such a high cost of life. It's not sustainable. And the other thing about the mobilisation is if you've seen like the quality of the troops they're getting of like the elderly and people who've never had military service, and the fact some of them are being given literally rusty AKs in the videos of them being armed and being told, get tampons to use as bandages and buy your own winter coats. I don't think this is going to be an effective army. It's going to be a lot worse in terms of Russian casualties than it's been already, because they at least had their somewhat professional army at the start of the war, even if it was wasted by just throwing it into strongly defended positions. But now they're essentially going to be trying the same thing with a demoralised sort of conscript army that don't have winter clothing, don't have proper first aid kits, probably proper rations, anything. Well, the rations already expired at the start of the war, but it just gets worse for Russia basically. The longer this draws on, the worse it's getting for Russia, the better it's getting for Ukraine in the sense of they're getting donated more and more equipment and sort of funding. Even though, like I said, it would be helpful for them if countries like Germany actually, Leopard stocks or whatever, decided to donate them some tanks, because of course they've stolen lots of Russian tanks, captured a lot of Russian tanks. Some countries, I think was it Slovenia, donated them like some retrofitted T-55s that are pretty cool. I know like Poland and the Czech Republic and that have donated them a load of the old T-72s they still had in service. But the point is that countries that keep saying they want this war to end and everything in the West that haven't donated a lot of equipment or ought to probably begin doing it. But yeah, in terms of this, I think all it really is Putin out of desperation so he doesn't get killed, essentially trying to somehow keep a hold of some territory and keep going. But what's really happening is obviously he's just making it worse and worse, because it's essentially like a gambler that's lost a load of money, throwing more and more, throwing good money after bad, or whatever it's called, where you just are digging your hole even deeper because you don't know when to quit, or whatever. So anyway, for the people who wanted me to give you an update on it, there we go. There's an 8-minute update on my thoughts on all the stuff going on at the moment in Ukraine.